I never expected the day to start like this. The air in the small cafe felt heavier than usual, or maybe it was just me, my nerves twisting in ways I didn't fully understand yet. I was fidgeting with the strap of my bag, trying not to draw attention, when he walked in. And I mean walked in. Every step he took seemed measured, confident, like the world somehow knew to part for him. He was older, definitely older, but not in a way that screamed, "Dad." No, it was different. There was this quiet authority, this magnetism that made it impossible to look away. Broad shoulders, perfectly fitted jacket, and a smile that was equal parts dangerous and teasing. The kind of smile that promised something exciting but left you guessing how far it would go. I swear, even his eyes were laughing before his lips ever did. I wanted to disappear into the floor. Honestly, I'm usually confident around strangers, but there was something about him that made my stomach clench. He glanced at me once, a fleeting glance that somehow felt deliberate, and I knew, that he could see straight through me. "Hey there," he said, his voice smooth, warm, just enough to make my chest tighten. "Mind if I sit?" I stammered because of course I did. My words failed me, and all I could manage was a nervous, "Sure." He smiled again, that smirk that made my insides twist, and slid into the seat across from me. Close enough that I could feel the faint warmth radiating from him, far closer than necessary in a cafe full of strangers. "You come here often?" he asked casually, leaning back but keeping his gaze locked on me, like a predator playing with its prey. I shook my head, unable to trust my voice to sound normal. He chuckled, a low, rich sound that made me blush before I even realized it. "Don't worry," he said, leaning just a fraction closer. "I won't bite, unless you want me to." I choked on my own thoughts. My brain was screaming run, but my body was glued to the chair, caught in this strange mix of fear, curiosity, and something else I couldn't name. His gaze wasn't just looking. It was exploring, teasing, testing boundaries I hadn't even realized existed. He reached over, just barely brushing my hand as he picked up the coffee menu. The touch was light, but electricity shot straight through me. I jerked back instinctively, embarrassed, but he didn't withdraw. Instead, he smirked, clearly enjoying my reaction. "Careful," he said, eyes sparkling. "You're twitchy. Makes you interesting." Interesting. I wanted to disappear under the table, yet part of me was intoxicated by his attention. The way he said it, that deliberate pause before his next word, made my heart hammer like I'd run a mile. Sort of. Him doing most of the talking, me stammering out half-formed sentences, trying desperately not to show how nervous I was. And yet, every word, every glance, every subtle touch of his hand against mine as he reached for sugar packets or stirred his coffee, built this tension I couldn't escape. At one point, I accidentally dropped my pen. He leaned over with a grin and handed it back, letting his fingers linger just a second longer than needed. "Careful," he teased, "you might make me fall for you before you even know it." I blinked. Did he really just say that? My face burned hotter than the coffee between us. "Don't be ridiculous," I muttered, but my voice cracked, betraying me. Of course it did. He laughed, and it wasn't a mean laugh. It was warm, indulgent, but still teasing. Ridiculous? Maybe. But I like a little challenge. Challenge. That was the word, wasn't it? He was testing me, pushing me, seeing exactly how far he could go without me running away. And part of me wanted him to push. Because every nerve in my body was alive, on fire in ways I'd never admit out loud. There was a moment later when he reached across the table to pick up a napkin, and our fingers brushed. It was barely a touch, but it made my chest jump. I caught my breath, hoping he didn't notice, but of course he did. His smirk widened. "You're cute when you're flustered," he said casually, like it was no big deal. I wanted to tell him to stop, to look away, to run, but the words didn't come. I couldn't. And then he leaned back, hands behind his head, watching me. There was confidence in that stance, a silent declaration that he knew exactly what effect he had. My brain scrambled, trying to reconcile his playful teasing with the storm of desire it stirred in me. I realized, mid-thought, that my body was betraying me. My heartbeat was erratic, my palms sweaty, and every glance his way made me want something. I didn't know what. I didn't even know if I was ready to admit it. But I knew, undeniably, that I wanted him to stay. Before I could overthink it, he stood, just for a moment, leaning over me with that grin. "I should go," he said, voice low and intimate, sending shivers down my spine. "But I have a feeling we'll see each other again." And then he was gone, leaving the air around me thick with unspoken promises. My hands shook as I clutched my coffee cup, trying to convince myself it was just a friendly encounter. But I couldn't lie to myself. The tension, the teasing, the way he had looked at me, it was only the beginning. Even after he left, I could feel his presence lingering, as if he had imprinted himself into the very air around me. And I realized, with a mix of fear and exhilaration, that this was more than a simple meeting. This was the spark, the first dangerous flicker of something I didn't fully understand but knew I couldn't resist. I didn't know his name yet, but I already knew I would never forget him. The next time I saw him, I wasn't ready. Honestly, I don't know if anyone could ever be ready for him. It was the way he moved, like the world somehow slowed for him, but also like he was daring me to keep up. I had barely recovered from our first encounter, and now here he was, leaning casually against the doorway of the bookstore I frequented, his smile cutting straight through me before he even said a word. "Back again?" he asked, voice low, teasing, like he'd been waiting just to see me flustered. I could feel my cheeks heating instantly. "Why, I like books," I stammered, sounding younger than I felt, weaker than I wanted to be. He chuckled, shaking his head, and leaned closer, just enough that I caught the faint scent of him, something clean, sharp, and faintly intoxicating. My stomach twisted. "You're cute," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, yet somehow it felt like it was only meant for me. Cute and nervous. Dangerous combination. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to say he was imagining things, that I wasn't affected, that his words didn't make my heartbeat jump. But I couldn't. Because they did. They did more than jump. They raced, skipped beats, and left me trembling in ways I wasn't ready to admit. We wandered through the aisles together, the casual pretense of browsing books disguising the tension that crackled between us. Every accidental brush of his hand against mine, every time our shoulders bumped as we reached for the same book, made my chest tighten. I caught myself holding my breath, trying not to betray how much each touch set me on fire. "Careful," he murmured, leaning so close that our faces were only inches apart. "You're going to make me do something I might regret." Regret? That word lingered in my head, and I wasn't sure who it applied to more, him or me. His smirk was infuriating, but irresistible, and I realized with a jolt that I wanted him to do something. Anything. But I also wanted to run. I wanted to escape before the pull of him completely unraveled me. I moved to another aisle, hoping to get some space, but he followed. It wasn't obvious, but every turn he took seemed calculated to stay near me, to keep me within reach without ever cornering me. His presence was intoxicating, maddening, thrilling, all at the same time. At one point we reached for the same book again. Our hands touched, lingering for just a fraction of a second longer than necessary. I flinched, heart racing, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he let his fingers brush against mine, deliberately slow, deliberate enough to make me shiver. "You're so tense," he said softly. "Relax. Or, maybe I like it better when you're wound tight." I choked on my thoughts. My body wanted to obey him, wanted to melt into the warmth and danger of his presence, but my mind screamed stop. Don't let him see how much this affects you. And yet, there was no stopping him. Every glance was a challenge. Every word a tease. He seemed to know instinctively how far to push, and I realized with a mixture of awe and fear that I was powerless against him. By the time we reached the small reading corner, my resolve was slipping. He leaned casually against the wall, arms crossed, smirking, watching me like a cat observing a mouse that didn't even realize it was trapped. "I have a confession," he said suddenly, voice low and teasing. "I've been thinking about you since the first day we met." I froze, my hands gripping the book in front of me so tightly I was afraid it would tear. "Thinking about me?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Yes, he said, stepping closer, so close that I could feel his warmth radiating toward me. And I can't stop wondering what it would be like if you just let me in. If you let me see you really? My stomach twisted in a way I hadn't expected. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide. But I also wanted him. I wanted him so badly it scared me. I looked up, and he was watching me with that same smirk, those eyes that seemed to see every part of me, every hesitation, every secret desire. I started, then faltered, unsure how to explain the storm he had already stirred inside me. He tilted his head as if reading my mind. Don't worry, he whispered, leaning so close that I could feel the faint brush of his lips near my ear. We don't have to rush. We can take our time, play a little game first. The word alone sent a thrill through me, because I knew exactly what he meant. It wasn't just a game of words, it was a game of control, of temptation, of restraint. And somehow, I wanted to play. I wanted to test the limits of both of us. He leaned back slightly, giving me just enough space to breathe, but the tension didn't leave. Every glance, every smirk, every subtle movement kept me on edge. I realized that I was watching him as much as he was watching me, trying to predict the next move, trying to understand the rules of this game that neither of us had agreed to but both were playing. And then, in a moment I didn't expect, he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my face. The contact was light, almost casual, but my breath caught. I wanted to pull back, but I couldn't. My fingers trembled at my sides, my heart hammering as he smiled down at me, clearly aware of the effect he had. You're holding back, he said softly. But afraid of what you want. I couldn't answer. The truth was terrifying. I was afraid. Afraid of how much I wanted him, how much I was drawn into his orbit, how much he was unraveling me without ever touching me the way I secretly longed for. He leaned closer again, close enough that I could feel his breath, teasing, warm, intimate. It's okay, he whispered, voice low and smooth. You don't have to say anything. Just feel it. Feel this tension. Feel us. And oh, I did. Every nerve in my body was on fire. Every glance, every brush, every teasing word was a spark lighting a flame that I didn't want to extinguish. And yet, I had to restrain myself. Part of me wanted to give in completely, to lean into the dangerous pull he exerted, but another part, my part that still clung to some shred of control, held me back. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, caught in the electricity of each other's presence, flirting on the edge of something more, something forbidden. Every accidental touch, every whispered comment, every lingering look was a test, one he clearly enjoyed as much as I feared and craved. Finally, as the store announced closing, he stepped back, giving me space, but not before leaning over once more and murmuring in a voice that made my knees weak, "We're not done. Not by a long shot. I promise you, the game is just beginning." And with that, he was gone, leaving me alone with my racing heart, trembling hands, and a mind that refused to calm down. I knew one thing for certain, I couldn't stop thinking about him. I couldn't stop wanting him. And the more I tried to resist, the more I realized that I didn't really want to. The temptation had begun, and I was powerless to fight it. The days after our bookstore encounter felt surreal. I kept replaying every glance, every brush of his fingers, every teasing word in my mind like a relentless echo. My chest would tighten at the memory of his smirk, the warmth of his presence, the way he had made me feel, exposed and exhilarated all at once. Then, of course, he appeared again. I didn't even know how he knew I'd be at the gym that evening, but there he was, leaning casually against the weight machine area, watching me with that same confident grin. My stomach twisted in anticipation and dread. "You're predictable," he said lightly, as if noticing my stiff posture. "I like that about you." I flushed. Predictable? I wanted to be invisible, to blend into the walls. Yet part of me was secretly thrilled that he noticed me at all. My body betrayed me, reacting to him before my brain had time to protest. He moved closer, and the space between us seemed to shrink without him even trying. Every step he took made me more aware of the subtle heat in my body, the tremor in my hands, the rapid thrum of my heartbeat. I wanted to tell him to stop. I wanted to run. But I didn't. I couldn't. You know, he said, lowering his voice, almost a whisper, you've been thinking about me since the last time, haven't you? I froze. How could he know? The thought alone made my chest tighten even more. I wanted to lie, to deny it, but my lips wouldn't move. And that only made him smile wider, clearly enjoying my reaction. See? I told you, you can't hide it from me, he said, leaning in slightly, the faint brush of his shoulder against mine sending shivers down my spine. And honestly, I like it. Makes the chase fun. Fun. That word should have irritated me. It should have made me feel frustrated or angry. Instead, it sent a rush of heat straight through me, leaving me dizzy and breathless. He stayed close, walking with me through the gym as though we were alone in a bubble, even though the place was full of other people. Every accidental touch, the brush of his hand against mine when passing weights, his arm grazing my back, was deliberate teasing. He knew exactly how to get under my skin without ever being overt. And it was maddening. At one point, he stopped behind me while I adjusted a weight on the bench. His presence was impossibly close, and I could feel the warmth of his body so clearly it made my breath hitch. You're working too hard, he murmured, leaning down slightly so his lips were near my ear. Don't strain yourself, or you might pass out. I'd hate that. I swallowed hard, acutely aware of his nearness. I wanted to pull away, to step back, to regain some semblance of control, but I couldn't. My body had other plans. Every nerve ending seemed alive, craving the contact, the teasing, the tension he carried with him like an aura. He straightened, stepping just slightly away, but the space still felt charged. His eyes held mine, dark and intense, and I realized that this was no longer simple teasing. It was more, so much more. It was power, temptation, and desire all wrapped up in a dangerous, intoxicating package. I wanted him to stop. I wanted him to leave. But I also wanted him to stay. I wanted to lean into him, to feel the heat of his body, to see just how far this game could go. The struggle between restraint and temptation was nearly unbearable. Then it happened. A moment of closeness so intense it left me breathless. I had bent down to pick up a drop towel, and he had leaned over me, his hand brushing my shoulder as he handed it back. The contact was brief, fleeting, yet electric. My hands trembled, my heart hammered in my chest, and I couldn't breathe properly. You're tense, he said softly, his voice almost intimate. Tense and irresistible. I wanted to say something. Anything. But I couldn't. My mind was spinning, caught between fear and longing, between curiosity and restraint. All I could do was stare at him, utterly exposed, utterly aware of how much I wanted him to push further, even as part of me screamed to stop. He noticed, of course. He always did. His smirk widened, knowing. You want this, don't you? He asked, his hand lingering ever so slightly on my arm. You want me to see you, like this? Don't fight it. I swallowed, desperate to find words, desperate to regain control, but none came. Instead, I gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. And in that moment, everything changed. The teasing intensified. He leaned closer, our faces inches apart, and the air between us crackled with unspoken promises. Every glance, every movement, every whisper was a test, and I realized I was willingly playing his game. I wanted to. I couldn't resist him, even if I tried. You know, he whispered, almost conspiratorially, we could do this all day. Push and pull. See who gives in first. I shivered, a mix of anticipation and fear coursing through me. Part of me wanted to run, to escape the dizzying pull he had over me, but another part, a part one hadn't acknowledged until now, wanted to see where this would go. I wanted to surrender, just a little, and feel the intensity of our connection fully. We lingered like that, suspended in a moment between hesitation and surrender, until the gym began to empty and the evening light faded. I could feel the tension coiling tighter and tighter, a spring ready to snap. And yet, neither of us crossed the line completely. Not yet. As we walked out together, side by side, he leaned just slightly closer and murmured, soon, very soon, we won't be able to hold back anymore. I didn't know if he meant it literally or metaphorically, but my body reacted anyway. My pulse raced, my breath caught, and I realized I had reached a tipping point. The game was no longer just playful teasing. It had become something more dangerous, more thrilling, more intoxicating than I had ever expected. By the time we parted ways, I was trembling, breathless, and utterly consumed by him. I knew one thing for certain. The spark had grown into a flame, and the line between restraint and surrender was thinner than ever. I wasn't ready to cross it completely, but the temptation was unbearable, and I knew I wouldn't resist for long. The power dynamic between us was clear. He was in control, confident, teasing, and impossibly magnetic. I was caught willingly, helplessly, and perhaps a little foolishly, in the orbit of someone I couldn't stop thinking about. It was late afternoon when I saw him again. The city streets were dappled with golden light, the kind that makes everything feel softer, almost unreal. I wasn't expecting to run into him, yet there he was, leaning against the railing of the small rooftop cafe I liked, looking impossibly calm, impossibly in control. My stomach flipped before I even took a step closer. "Fancy seeing you here," he said, his smirk tugging at the corners of his lips. That smirk, it had haunted my thoughts for days, and now, standing before me, it made my pulse surge in ways I could barely manage. I tried to sound casual. "I come here sometimes, to think." My voice was steadier than I felt, but my hands betrayed me, gripping the strap of my bag a little too tightly. He tilted his head, those piercing eyes locking onto mine. "Thinking about me?" I froze because of course he would know. How could he not? The thought alone made my heart hammer so loudly I was certain he could hear it. "Maybe," I admitted, my voice soft, almost inaudible. And then I wanted to bury my face in my hands for daring to speak the truth aloud. He chuckled, that warm, teasing laugh that always made my knees weak. "Good," he said simply, and suddenly he was beside me, close enough that our shoulders brushed. Just a light contact, but it felt like fire crawling along my skin. We ordered coffees and sat at the edge of the rooftop, the city stretching endlessly below us. The tension that had been building over weeks, every glance, every brush of fingers, every teasing word, finally seemed palpable, almost unbearable. I could feel it coiling inside me like a spring, ready to release, and I realized I couldn't hold back anymore. He caught my gaze, smirk still in place, and leaned just slightly closer. "You know," he murmured, voice low and intimate, "we don't have to play games forever. You can give in, if you want." The words hit me like a shockwave. My mind screamed, "Don't, stop, run," but my body betrayed me. I wanted this. I wanted him, more than I'd dared to admit to myself, more than I'd allowed myself to feel. The weeks of teasing, of tension, of near misses, had led to this. My restraint had been admirable, maybe even necessary, but now I wanted to surrender. I let my fingers brush against his, testing the water, seeing how he'd react. He didn't pull away. Instead, he interlaced his fingers with mine, giving just the slightest squeeze, and I nearly melted on the spot. My heart was pounding, every nerve alive with anticipation. "I can't stop thinking about you," I confessed, the words tumbling out before I could second-guess them. My face burned, but I didn't retract them. He didn't pull away, didn't tease me this time. He simply smiled, a softer, warmer smile that made the tension between us feel less like a game and more like a promise. "You don't have to," he whispered. "I've been waiting for you to say that." The moment felt suspended in time. I realized that the teasing, the tension, the push and pull, it had all been leading to this. I leaned slightly toward him, drawn like a magnet, until our foreheads almost touched. His eyes softened, and for the first time, I saw him not as the confident, teasing older man who had been playing with me, but as someone who cared, someone who wanted me, not just for desire, but for me. "You really want me to?" I trailed off, heart hammering in my chest. "Yes," he said simply, leaning closer. "I want all of you if you're ready." I didn't hesitate. Not fully. I didn't know what the next steps would be, but I didn't need to. In that moment, I gave in to the chemistry between us, to the undeniable pull that had been building since our first encounter. I rested my hand on his, feeling the warmth, the strength, the reassurance that he was there with me, not just teasing me but guiding me. We talked, quietly, intimately, our knees brushing, our hands slowly entwined. We shared pieces of ourselves that we hadn't before. My fears, my insecurities, his experiences, his regrets. Every word deepened the connection, and I realized that what had begun as a playful, teasing game had blossomed into something far more profound. Trust. The wind picked up, ruffling my hair, and he leaned down to brush it from my face. His fingers lingered, grazing my cheek, and I leaned into the touch, letting the warmth and comfort wash over me. The chemistry between us had been undeniable, but now it was matched by emotion, something tender, something real. "I've wanted this for a long time," he confessed, his lips barely moving. "I just didn't know if you felt the same." I squeezed his hand. "I do," I said, voice steady now. "I've felt it from the beginning." There was a pause, a moment where we simply looked at each other, letting the silence speak. It was thrilling, intense, yet comforting all at once. I realized I didn't need more than this right now. His presence, his hand in mine, the promise in his eyes. Then, in a moment that made my heart nearly stop, he leaned just slightly closer, his lips brushing against my temple. Not a kiss, not fully, but a touch so tender and intimate that it left me breathless. I shivered, a delicious mixture of thrill and contentment flooding through me. "I guess, this is the part where the game ends," he murmured, voice soft, teasing only slightly, "and something real begins." I smiled, resting my head against his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I think I like this version better," I admitted. "Much better than all the teasing." He chuckled, pulling me slightly closer, and the city lights flickered on below us, casting a warm glow over everything. We didn't need words. The connection was clear. The desire had been acknowledged, the emotions shared, and something deeper had begun to take root between us. Even as the sun dipped below the horizon, the world around us fading into twilight, I felt a sense of completion, and yet, also the thrilling anticipation of what was to come. We had crossed the line from tension and teasing into something tangible, something ours. But there was still mystery, still possibility, still the spark of desire that had ignited from the very first moment we met. "I think this is just the beginning," he whispered, brushing his thumb across my hand. "And I can't wait to see where it goes." I rested my head against him, feeling safe, exhilarated, and alive all at once. "Neither can I admitted. And as we sat there, hands intertwined, hearts racing, the city alive below us, I realized that the teasing, the tension, the games, they had all led to this. To a connection that was electric, tender, and undeniably ours. And in that moment, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever came next, I wanted him by my side. The spark that had started so small had become a flame, and now, at last, it was blazing brightly, lighting the way for something beautiful, something thrilling, and something real.